You know, the best part about speaking or giving talks for me is that people actually show up. So I just wanted to say thank you to everyone for coming to my talk today. And then I'm going to ask everybody a favor, because this has got to be interactive, right? Otherwise, I'll be boring. So will everybody stand up for me really quick? So you guys are all familiar probably with the 4 chemicals that are produced by the human body that make us feel happy. That would be endorphins, oxytocin, dopamine, and and Skittles, right? So what we're going to do is we're all going to get pumped up, right? So I want you to turn to your table mates and just high five, high five, high five. Everybody high five. Raise your hand if you're a project manager. All right, cool. Raise your hand if you're a program manager. Cool. Raise your hand if you're a portfolio manager. Raise your hand if you want to be a project manager. Okay, excellent. Now, here's the question of the evening. Who's a leader? Okay, a couple of you. That's interesting. So here's the interesting thing about being a leader. It has nothing to do with authority. It has nothing to do with a title. It has all to do with choice. So I'm going to invite every single one of you to make the decision right now to call yourself a leader. So who's a leader? Right on. Seriously, I don't think everybody raised their hand. One more time. Who's a leader? All right, so let's talk about leadership. So this talk is called Communication is a Leadership Tool. And what we're going to do is we're going to start out by talking about principles. And then I'm going to talk about rules. And then I'm going to talk about techniques. Who's in? Okay, cool. So the important thing here is to start with why. Why do we communicate? Anybody? To lead. I love you guys. Maslow says we communicate as human beings to get our needs met. What I'm here to tell you today that as leaders, we're here to get people to go from one place to another. People don't launch projects because they want their company to be the same when the project is over. A leader's job is to lead the team to the greatest potential success. Leaders communicate to do what? To lead that which they are responsible for forward as aggressively as possible, leaving no time or money on the table, to ensure that their team members are as wildly successful as they possibly can be. So why do leaders communicate? So remember when you were a little kid and the clown came to the party and the clown was like, hi, and somebody said hi, and the clown was unsatisfied with a hi. So the clown said hi, and then a few more people said hi, and the clown kept scaring you into saying hi until everybody said hi and the clown was satisfied with a hi? That's what we're doing right now. Okay? So why do leaders communicate? To lead. One more time. Why do leaders communicate? Why do leaders communicate? To lead. So who's heard that most projects fail due to communication? Raise your hand. Only a couple of you? Everywhere I go, that's all I hear is projects fail due to poor communication. Well, the interesting thing is, right, root cause analysis. Projects fail due to poor communication. So what do organizations do? They focus on improving their communication. I have a question. You, sir, with the badge, green shirt. If you focus on improving your communication, will you? Yes. No, I believe in you. You can do anything you set your mind on. If you focus on improving your communication, you will improve your communication. But does that necessarily mean that you'll improve your leadership skill? No. What you're going to improve is what you focus on, and that's your communication. I see companies all the time focusing on improving their communication, and they keep saying that projects fail due to poor communication. Here's what I espouse. Organizations should focus on improving their leadership skills, should focus on training every single individual in their organization on how to be a more effective leader. And if organizations were full of leaders from the temporary pool all the way through to the CEO, right? Everybody was a leader. Would we improve our project success rate? Absolutely. So why do leaders communicate? Boom. So we're going to talk about the leadership breakdown. This is really interesting, I think. Did you guys know that words only communicate 7% of your message? Only 7% is received via your words. 38% is voice tone modulation, and 55% is body movements. So if you break that down to situational leadership, and you're like, hey, you know, I need to have something delivered somewhere by a certain time, how much of my leadership effectiveness do I need to bring to bear? I need to bring all of my leaderness to get somebody to deliver something somewhere by a certain time? Something small, like maybe a Frappuccino.
You just got to bring enough to get the job done.
Right, I can keep it simple because I don't want to be bringing all this all the time. It would become exhausting, right, Steve? Yes. Okay, so if I need something simple done, I can send a text message, right? If I need something marginally simple but not scary for anybody, I might be able to pick up the phone, right, and improve my effectiveness. But if I've got to deliver bad news or I need to ensure a result that's super important, I need to bring 100% of my effectiveness. So you guys see how this breaks down in respect to effectiveness? I can only be 7% effective with a text message or an email. I can be up to 45% effective as a leader, because that's 7 plus 38, right? As a leader on the phone, and I can be 100% effective wherever I'm at as a leader. So what's funny about this, since I've been teaching this, I've become really good at sort of hearing or seeing what people are saying. So sometimes I'll say to my wife, hey, would you like to go have dinner at Duke's tonight? And she'll say, sure. And I'll go, so you mean no? And she'll say, I said yes. I'll say 7% of you said yes, but 55% of you said, I don't want to do that. Don't go do that. By the way, don't do that. Don't do what I just did. It's a funny joke, but don't try that at home. All right, any questions on the leadership breakdown, your situational leadership, your effectiveness, right? So when you've got a big problem that you've got to deal with, best to send an email? No. Excellent. All right, taking responsibility for what's heard. Who's heard that? It's like this hippy-dippy new movement, like leaders should take responsibility for what's heard. All right, so now you've heard it, because only like 3 people raised their hand when I said, have you heard of it? Now you've heard of it, and I can never take it back. Okay, so here's the deal. Raise your hand if you think as a leader, you can take, I'm the leader, and I'm hoping you're going to follow. I say something, and I'm going to take responsibility for what you hear. Raise your hand if you think that's possible. Couple of you. All right, you've got some enlightened folks in the room. Raise your hand if as a leader you think you can take responsibility for what's heard. It's better. All right, now raise your hand if you think you cannot take responsibility for what's heard, because you know people are interpreting what they're hearing with their years of life, right? Okay, you can't take responsibility for what's heard. So let's think about this for a second, right? I'm a super clear communicator. Who thinks so? Who's not playing again? Come on. I'm a super clear communicator, and I'm the boss. I'm the CEO, right? So everybody has to do what I say. Bullshit. So I'm a super clear communicator. You and I have an interaction, right? You commit to going and doing some stuff, right, by a certain day. That day comes around, and you come in the office, and you give me something different than what I asked for. The deal here is you believe and worked really hard that on that deliverable. You believe that you were giving me what I asked for, right? So I can take the position that I'm a super clear communicator, and you need to really ask more questions. I'm going to coach, right? You need to ask more questions, right? Come on, how long have we been working together? You should know me. What have I done? I've taken the position of being right. When did she stop listening to me? Like right immediately. She's like, oh my God, here he goes again. And the worst part about it is she's already upset that she didn't succeed. Because every single human being wants to be successful. Nobody wants to fail. So in the end, I can take the position of being right, or I can take the only position I can take and grow. And I'm going to take responsibility. I'm going to think, how could I have communicated better? What can I do? I'm going to take the opportunity to grow. And what I might do the very next time, because we had, we didn't end up on the same page, after we talk, I might say, okay, do me a favor and just kind of run me through what your next steps are going to be. So I'm going to have her paraphrase back to me. That might be one way I grow in this situation. But ultimately, I can be right and believe that I can't take responsibility for what's heard, right? Or I can work to be the most effective leader possible and take responsibility when I don't get the result that I'm looking for. And that's taking responsibility for what's heard. Now, on this responsibility thing, I think it's really interesting. I have a 2.5-year-old daughter and a 4.5-year-old son, and I believe passionately that it's my responsibility as their father to teach them to be productive, contributing, happy people when I send them off into the world, right? And I have between now and the time that they leave, which hopefully is 18. Will I succeed? It's rhetorical, but you could raise your hand if you think I might, right? I don't know, but that doesn't alleviate my responsibility. And that's kind of an interesting way to think about responsibility. Taking responsibility for something where you're not 100% sure whether you will or you won't be successful is much more courageous than only taking responsibility for those things where you know you will be successful. So the hierarchy of leadership success, this is really important. The difference between a leader and a tyrant is that a leader works hard for the sake of everyone else, while a tyrant makes others work hard for them. Have any of you ever had that boss that made you feel / outright communicated that you were there to work your ass off so they could be successful? Your job was to work really hard so they could be successful. Have you had that boss? Raise your hand. It's okay, they're not here. Right on. Almost everybody. And when I said right on, I don't mean like I'm happy that you had that boss. Now, who in the room has had the boss that you felt like cared about you, that took the time to teach you, to invest in you so you could be successful? Who's had that boss? And what wouldn't you have done? Is he sitting right next to you? Right on. What wouldn't you do for him, right? What wouldn't you have done for that boss? Think about it for a second. Do you remember that your relationship with that person, hopefully you still work with that person, but think about it. You love that person. You might not admit it to their face, but when it comes to getting things done and working hard, are you going to do whatever it takes to get it done to be successful? You're going to do whatever it takes. Now, in the situation where you had that boss, right, that treated you like you were just there to do whatever you had to do so they could be successful, what time are you clocking out? On time. Right? When it comes to pulling the Hail Mary to get something done so they can be successful, right, they have to ask you. Maybe even direct you or order you. But the boss that cares about you, that invested in you, they don't even have to ask. You'll do whatever it takes to ensure that you are successful so they can be successful. So if you think about it, it's the natural hierarchy. I didn't make this up. The idea is that leaders put their team first, the needs of their team. What can I do as a leader to ensure that my team members are successful? Who's heard the saying, we lead up, down, and across? All right, excellent, right? My relationship with that phrase is I help up, down, and across. And that's thinking to myself, in this situation where you did something and you didn't get the result that either one of us were looking for, what are your needs in that moment? Are your needs for me to tell you that you should have listened, you should have asked a bunch of questions? That's not what her needs are. That's not how I help her succeed. How do I help her succeed? I think, okay, hey, bygones, let's talk about it again. I'm going to ask a few more questions, right? I'm going to do what I can to ensure that we end up on the same page. And after that, I'm going to ask you, what else can I do to help you? She's going to go away feeling good about the situation instead of bad about the situation, right? I had the opportunity to improve my ability to lead because we communicate to what? Lead. Boom. As a leader, if you focus on ensuring your team is successful, your project, your mission, your company will be successful, and then you will be successful. Is there anyone in the room that thinks it's possible to make a mission or a project or a company successful? That's excellent. Okay, check this out. Everybody that raised their hand, I want you to meet with me after the presentation because we're going to get together. I'm going to write it down. We're going to patent it, and we're going to make billions. It's not possible to make a company, a mission, or a project successful because it doesn't have a heartbeat. It doesn't have a cell phone number. I can't call it up and get it all excited. In the end, all a project, a mission, or a company is an idea that people rally around. It's an idea that we get together on and build. In the end, it's people that deliver projects, a mission, ensure a company is successful. And when you're the leader that focuses on ensuring that your team members are as successful as they possibly can be, what's the net result? You will be wildly successful. And I've heard people say, it's just business. Who's heard that? That's what people say so they can do terrible things to people at work and sleep at night. It's not just business. It's just people. Now, I talked about a lot of things just now that make you want to high five probably and hug. Like literally everybody in the room is like, yeah, I want that leader. Is there anybody in the room that's like, no, I don't want that leader, the leader that I was just talking about? So everybody gets really excited and they're like, gosh, I want that leader. He or she sounds so nice. Nice is important, but it's not the point. The deal is when you are that leader, it's also important that there's a high degree of accountability in your organization. We have to do what we say we're going to do. You as the leader have to ensure that you're holding people accountable. Now, the funny thing about the word accountability is that we as human beings have an interesting relationship with that word because it's a word that comes from our childhood, right? Because our parents held us accountable, right? They said, don't do that. And when they did that, they set boundaries. But as a little kid, that boundary doesn't feel loving. It feels like a punishment. So there's accountability and there's consequences. And these are hard things to say. They're even harder to do because of our relationship with them. So the idea here is reframing what accountability looks like. That's the first step. Accountability is about knowing when you have stalled and finding a way forward, period. If you're not measuring it, you can't improve it. When that conversation has to occur, how do you know? It's usually because you're like, uh-oh. Oh, what do you mean that didn't happen? Are you guys feeling me? Whatever that moment is where you're like, right? So you know you have to have a conversation because leadership is about people, and you as the leader generally aren't having that moment where you're like, about yourself. unless it has to do with your honey-do list. So what I've done is I've put together this exercise that has 4 principles. The principles are simple. Say what needs to be said, when it needs to be said, the way it needs to be heard, to those that need to hear it. Those are the 4 principles. But doing that's not that simple. You kind of have to work up to it. So what I've put next to each one of the principles is the potential emotion that you might feel associated with each of those steps, and then the leadership quality that you need to bring to bear. The emotions about you, the leadership quality is what you want to be. So in that moment when you have to say what needs to be said, that oh moment, that's usually fear. Is that the best time to say what needs to be said? No, but the most interesting thing about our emotions is usually immediately following fear comes anger. That's that motivating emotion. And there's a couple different ways to do anger. There's the big out loud anger where everybody knows you're angry, and usually you're playing for who when you're angry? You're playing for you. You're trying to make the problem go away. You're attacking the problem. Fight, flight, or freeze. So you need to go from fear to courage, anger to compassion. The way it needs to be heard, that's about love, but love's about you. Not everybody's a hugger. I'm a hugger. I'm a hugger, right? So you need to go from love to empathy. And as you're ramping up on empathy, you're feeling for the other person. You know where you begin and you end. And you're thinking, what do they need from me right now? You're going to grow some confidence. And in that confidence, you're going to be able to deliver the message. The important thing here is that they know you're playing for them. The message should be delivered with loyalty. I'm here for you. What can I do for you? You can't fake that. That result that I was talking about in our interaction, the only way I'm authentically going to get the result that I'm looking for is if I'm truly playing for you. The key to that is checking your emotions, meaning check in. How am I feeling right now? Am I speaking for me or am I speaking for you? So as the leader, when you're getting ready to say what needs to be said, when it needs to be said, the way it needs to be heard, that those that need to hear it, ask yourself, how am I feeling right now? And if it's any of the about you emotions, there's got to be a shift. The best way to do that is to actually care about the individual that you're delivering the message to. And again, you can't fake that. Care. Rules. Who likes rules? Raise your hand. They're good rules, though. Trust me, they're not confining rules. They're just rules of engagement, right? Rules to get you there. The first rule of leadership is don't communicate with executives and client stakeholders in mumbo jumbo. The coolest thing about project management is we have a lot of mumbo jumbo. Let's call it out. Earned value, critical path, cost performance index. You guys are all familiar with what I'm saying, right? Yes. I was like seeing blank faces and I was like, where are we, Steve? It's a PMI meeting, right? Okay. So the trick here is we wanted to learn about that stuff because we're gluttons for punishment. So we learned it, and it's super cool, and we get really excited about it. The executives that employ us, they probably have never walked our path. They weren't project managers. They don't want to be project managers. So if you run into their office and you're like, hey, we have a problem. Who cares if it's a risk or an issue or an impediment, right? We have a problem. It's impacting a task in the plan. And you say, it'll be impacting the critical path in 10 days, and they don't understand what you're saying? Are you an effective leader? No. So to illustrate my point, I'm going to communicate the same thing 3 different times, 3 different ways, and we're all as a group going to choose the most appropriate language to use if you're a leader. Raise your hand if you're a leader. Boom. Yeah. All right. So, hey boss, we have a problem. We have 10 days until it impacts the critical path. Here's what we should do. Or, hey boss, we have a problem. It's got 10 days of slack. Here's what we should do. Or, hey boss, we have a problem. We have 10 days until it starts impacting the end date and the cost of the project. Here's what we should do. Raise your hand if you vote for number 3. I said the same thing, the exact same thing. Well, I communicated the exact same thing 3 times, but literally my 4-year-old would have only understood the 3rd one, right? So we don't communicate to sound smart. Give me a second. We don't communicate to sound smart. We communicate to what? Therefore, they have to understand what we're saying. Who's been to the doctor, right, and had the doctor convince you to go to sleep so they could perform some sort of procedure that you needed? Like, who's had an operation? Who's gone to sleep and had an operation? Doctors are the greatest leaders in the world. Their whole job is to convince you to go to sleep so they can cut you open. And they do it, and it's because they don't communicate to you in mumbo jumbo. Sometimes they'll go in the corner and have a conversation with another doctor. They'll confer, doctor, doctor, doctor. It's like 10 minutes. And then they'll come back and spend 45, 50 minutes kind of explaining what they went over with the other doctor because they have bedside manner and they're trying to talk you into going to sleep so they can cut you open. Okay? So the trick here is, as a leader, we communicate to what? Lead. So you don't want to communicate with your executive or client stakeholders in mumbo jumbo. All in favor say aye. Aye. And if there's any lawyers in the room, I'm sorry, but you guys know what I mean. Who's a leader? Which means you rely on other people's success to be successful. We just talked about it, right? So if you've ever been in a position where you're no longer the subject matter expert that does the work, you're the leader of people that do the work, you know that when people stop by your office and they say, hey, how was lunch? Did you golf this weekend? They're just trying to distract you from the problem they're going to tell you about when the small talk's over. Because we in corporate America have been taught if you have to tell somebody that something is bad or deliver bad news, that you should soften the moment by making small talk, right? Here's the problem. They know that you're there to bring them a problem. They know. The second you show up, they're like in their head, oh God, what's wrong now? And you're talking and they're going into fight or flight. They've developed this conditioned response to go into fight or flight when you stop by their office because they know you're going to bring them a problem. So how does fight or flight happen? Like, boom, you're deep in fight or flight? No, it's kind of a journey, right? So the longer you let them go down the rabbit hole, the further in fight or flight they're going to be. And in the end, you're going to ask them to make a decision, right? You're going to say, here's the problem, here's the solution, decide. Let's talk about fight or flight. When we go into fight or flight, 2 of our brain centers shut down, and we're reduced to the emotional level of an 8-year-old. Now picture your favorite executive in fight or flight, 2 of their brain centers shut down, they're reduced to the emotional level of an 8-year-old, and you want to ask them to make a decision. Good idea? I'm going to teach you at the end of this actually how to recondition executives to not go into fight or flight when you bring them problems, which is why you guys will stay if I go late. That's why I save it for the end, right? It's the grand finale. But I'm not kidding. I will actually teach you to recondition them. So when you stop by their office, it'll take 5 tries. When you stop by their office, they'll just be like, cool, I know you're bringing me a problem. I'm cool because there's going to be a solution. I know this exercise you always execute. I've got this. To illustrate this, have any of you ever had a problem on your project where you went to the project team and you were like, hey guys, and they were like, oh my God, really? And you started working it, and suddenly this beautiful, simple, elegant solution emerges. It feels almost like an epiphany. Like, oh my God, that's so amazing. I can't wait to go tell the boss when I explain how we're going to make this giant problem go away. The boss is going to be like, you guys are geniuses. And then you go and you knock on the boss's office and you're brief, you're brilliant, and you stop talking and they argue with you. They argue with you. And you're like, how come they can't see this? It's so simple, it's so obvious. They're in fight or flight. Okay, doing a can-do attitude. Raise your hand if you have a can-do attitude. So almost everybody always raises their hand when I ask that question. Now go to work in your heads. It'll just be for a minute, I promise. Go to work in your heads. How many people in the office have a can-do attitude? No, it's weird, right? In most places, right? And when I ask this question on a one-to-one, people will say, no, it's weird, right? Not very many people have a can-do attitude. And it's because as human beings, we do this really interesting thing. And it's that we mix up the ingredients. So the ingredients are, I have information, I have to provide you information. But if you provide that information out of order, not considering the human being, people will go into fight or flight and they will not perceive you as having a can-do attitude. So check this out. When an executive asks you to do something, you need to ask questions, right? You're going to ask questions because you want to identify the boundaries. How long, how much, why do I need it to be done? I need to understand why you need it done because I've got to go get with the team and we might have to make decisions and I'm going to bring it back to you. More often than not, we end up then working the problem with the executive because we all used to be subject matter experts, right? So what do you need to identify when you start working the problem? Boom. Right, what are my obstacles? So anytime somebody's asked you to do something, in order to figure out how to get from point A to point B, you have to identify the obstacles. So in that moment, you start working it, trying to figure out how you're going to do it, knowing that you still have to go get with the subject matter experts, the people that are actually going to do the work, to figure out how it's going to get done. And when you leave, what's that executive left with? The obstacles. They're like, oh, Steve's got it. I'm sure he's going to come up with an elegant solution with the team. You know that thing that we came up with, that sounded pretty good, right? But they're stuck with the obstacles. It creates fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And the clock is ticking. They're just waiting. God, I can't wait till Steve calls me back. I know he's going to come up with a solution. God, I wonder what he's doing. So I call up Steve, and I say, hey, Steve, how's it going? Steve's like, he looks at the team. He's like, because Steve's with the team, and he's working the obstacle, right? He's trying to figure out how to come up with a plan. And then I'm like, hey, Steve, can I come help, right? And Steve's like, yeah, that's kind of weird, Jay, sure. And he hangs up the phone. He looks at the team. He's like, micromanager, Jay's going to come down, right? So the idea is here, you can communicate the obstacles without a roadmap, create fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Or take the approach that I'm going to ask questions. I'm going to identify what you want, why you want it, what the boundaries are. And then I'm going to be like, I'll be back. I've got this. I'm on top of it. I'm going to go get with the team. I'm going to identify the obstacles to create a roadmap or a plan. And then the next time I see you, I'm going to be like, hey, Michael, here's what we're going to do. Michael might say, why are you going to do it? And I'm going to be like, here's an obstacle. We've got to go this way. Here's another obstacle. We've got to go this way. Are the obstacles scary now? No. If you just identify the obstacles without a roadmap, you create fear, uncertainty, and doubt because they don't know how you're going to solve them, and you leave them with that. If you identify the obstacles with your team and then use the obstacles to substantiate your roadmap, you're not scaring anybody, and your obstacles make you seem smart. Same information. I'm not saying withhold information from anyone. What I'm saying is present the information in an order that doesn't create fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Rather, it creates confidence. All right, techniques. Who's ready for some techniques? Leading executives, the executive dilemma. So when do we need to bring 100% of our leadership effectiveness to bear? When we have a problem, right? You can call it a risk, you could call it an issue, you can call it an impediment. But anytime we have something that's impacting our ability to move something that we plan to get done forward, we have a what? A problem. So anytime you have a problem, and I come to you, you're the executive, how's that executive going to feel about the problem? It's going to be a high-stress situation because that problem impacts their ability to succeed. So we think of problems as with the project. The truth is the problems are with our project owner's bonus. Right? So when you walk into their office, you need to know that project success equals executive success. The executives are 6 degrees separated from the work. So any problem equals a high-stress situation. So you guys ready for your first technique? Leaders need to be fearless, irreverent, and confident. Write it down. Everybody gets what I mean by fearless. Everybody gets what I mean by confident, but this irreverent thing, there's a great deal of misunderstanding. All irreverent means to say what others wouldn't say. So, right, to say what others wouldn't say. So think about it, right? Sometimes you need to tell an executive that the approach that the project is taking is going to create a problem. And some people won't say that. So the analogy that I like to use to illustrate this, if I was having a one-to-one conversation with the President of the United States, and the President of the United States used the word irregardless in a sentence, I might feel compelled to show reverence and not say anything, but that's the president. The president, I mean, with Trump out there, I'm going to have to change my analogy, right? Yeah. All right. The idea is shapes global opinion, right? Impacts the world economy. So I, looking out, might say to the president, Mr. President, with all due respect, and after you say that, everybody knows you can say whatever you want, right? With all due respect, irregardless isn't a word. And I know that there's some debate as to whether it is or it isn't a word because it's in the dictionary. But shizzle's in the dictionary. And even Snoop Dogg said the shizzle's dead. So I would say, Mr. President, with all due respect, irregardless isn't a word, right? However, since you're the president, if you insist on continuing to use it, I recommend using one of those presidential decrees to clear up any misunderstanding. So any questions on being fearless, irreverent, and confident? Now, that shows up, by the way, like I'm being fearless, irreverent, and confident right now. And it's kind of slap happy, it's funny, right? My role model's Tony Stark. That doesn't work in every situation. You can be very seriously fearless, reverent, and confident. Some people's style is differently. This guy that you see here, I have used in meetings. And I do high five and dude CEOs of Fortune 100s. Okay? But not every situation requires this fearless, irreverent, confident. Some situations require a little more stoic, fearless, irreverent, and confident. But what it never requires, leadership and bringing somebody a problem, you set the tone as the leader, right? It never requires head down, slunched body, whispering to yourself, I have 15 things, I don't really know what to do, right? That's not fearless, irreverent, confident. Anybody have any questions about fearless, irreverent, confident? All right, perception is reality. So you set the tone as the leader. So if you run in and the sky is falling, or I call you up and I'm like, hey man, how's it going? And you're like, it's okay. And then you want to tell me about a problem after setting that tone, what's going to happen to me? I'm going to go into fight or flight. So it's really important as we lead up that you remember that you need to lead, right? We show up when we need to lead across and down. Often, though, people will be like, well, it's the boss, so I could just show up and let the boss be the boss. I don't have to be the leader. But the fact is, you do, as a leader, need to effectively lead up, especially when they're 7 or 8 degrees separated from the work, and you're responsible for ensuring a successful outcome. So here's the next tip, right? Anytime you need to lead, bring 100% of that leadership efficacy, you need to be cool, honey bunny. Everybody repeat after me. Be cool, honey bunny.
Be cool, honey bunny.
Now we're going to make it an acronym, because everybody but Elon Musk likes an acronym. So BCHB. BCHB? BCHB. Who feels it? Who's like, I'm so BCHB right now? The science of updates. So when things go south on a project, we focus down. It's this weird thing about human nature. We have a tendency to focus down, meaning we get with the project team, we set up camp, we're focusing on working the problem. So it's okay if I didn't get my status report out on Friday night. Right?
Yeah.
Except the problem is, if a status report is supposed to go out every Friday night, and you don't send the status report out on Friday night, when does the project owner or your executive sponsor realize it? Somewhere around 5 o'clock on Saturday. And what do they assume? Oh, I'm sure everything is amazing. That's why they didn't send me a status report. Right? So first, no news is always bad news. And you've ruined their weekend, so Monday's going to suck for you. The other thing, though, also is, right, you focus down and you circle the wagons and you work really hard. Who's done that? You have a problem, you get with the team, you set up camp, the team works really, really hard, and you save it. Whatever it was, it didn't fall off the cliff. You won. And then you go to your boss and you're like, hey, Steve, we did this and we did that and it was awesome and we rocked it and we killed it. And Steve's like, cool. Right? Because Steve's thinking, yeah, dude, that's what you do. Right? Have you ever had that happen where you went and you wanted them to just be excited? Because you weren't communicating along the way. You didn't get them involved. You didn't let them know, hey, we've got a problem. Here's an update. Here's how we're moving it forward. Here's an update an hour later. Here's an update an hour later. If they're on the journey with you, they're going to celebrate with you. They're going to understand how hard you work. Now, here's the trick. If you focus heads down and you don't communicate and it falls off the cliff and you fail, they will never believe that had you allowed them to weigh in, there wouldn't be a different outcome. Because you didn't let them weigh in. And who failed? You, the project team, and that executive. The executive fails, right? They have to bear the burden of that loss. And you didn't let them weigh in. So the science of updates is really important in that when things go south, communicate more, not less. You get them invested, and more importantly, what you're going to focus on is, here's the progress we've made since the last time I checked in with you. Here are our impediments, here are our obstacles, here are our problems, and here's what we're doing about them. They're going to listen to what you're doing about solving the problems, and they're either going to go, cool, go do that, or they're going to say, you know what, maybe you should do this. So when you succeed, everybody parties, okay? And if you fail, they're going to see the work that you put into not failing, and they had the opportunity every step of the way to show up with a silver bullet. You failed together. And so this is what they'll say. If anybody could have done it, it'd have been this team. So the next time you find yourself in that situation where you're like, oh my God, I got to circle the wagons, I got to get the team together, we've got to work really, really hard to solve the problem, do that and start providing frequent updates. Managing expectations. All right, so my first job out of the Navy was at Universal Studios. I was out of the Navy 2 weeks. I had a job at Universal Studios because my mom was the assistant to the CIO. I'm not lying. My mommy got me my first job outside of the Navy. Now, being the ambitious cat that I am, I got that job, and within a couple of months, I was on a project. I was the project manager for a project where every 2 weeks I had to provide status to the CIO. So I'm super excited. Now, this was 1996, and this is back when people did things in corporate America that HR wouldn't let them get away with today. So like executives would like yell and scream and literally fire people in meetings. Like you're in a meeting and they would fire you, right? Now today they call you into HR, it's all nice and you're still fired, right? But you can't get fired in a meeting. Okay, so I'm super excited and I don't know what I'm doing. I'm like 3 weeks out of the Navy, so I'm looking around, I'm watching everybody, and there's these guys from Price Waterhouse in there, and they're doing this managing the expectations thing, which we all know is when an executive asks you to do something, you think about it, and then you tell them all the ways that it could go south, so you sound really, really smart. So I do this with Mr. George Brenner. I go in there, I give my status, and George Brenner says, okay, J. Scott, I want you to do this, this, and this, and this, and this. And I'm like, cool, this is my opportunity to manage his expectations. So I immediately retort with all of the obstacles to getting done what he asked me to get done, and he started screaming at me. He used words, my mother was in the meeting, by the way. He used words at me in front of my mother that I wasn't allowed to use in the house growing up, and I'm pretty sure the only reason I didn't get fired is because my mother was in the room. So the trick here is, in setting expectations, is not stating the impediments, right? The trick is very, very simple. It's using the 3 steps to credibility. And this is something you've been told 1,000 times, but I want to illustrate the power of it. Steve asked me to do something. He's the executive. I've given my status, and he says, okay, J. Scott, I want you to go do X, Y, and Z. I'm going to ask questions until I understand. I'm going to ask my clarifying questions, and then I'm going to paraphrase what I think he wants me to do. I'm going to say, so you want me to do X, Y, and Z. If I get it wrong, what's going to happen? He'll keep talking. He'll go, oh, no. And he'll know that we're not on the same page. At some point, I'm going to say, so here's what you want. You want X, Y, and Z. And you're going to go, yes, a miracle has happened. You know that I know what you want. You know that I know what you want. And I know that you know what I know what you want, right? So I'm going to go, awesome, you've got it. That's the second step, is exuberantly confirm acceptance. I've got this. And then go get it done. Their expectations are super clear. You know what they want. What should their expectation be? That they'll get it. Now, this is where this is really important. So if you go to the team and you get with the team and you can't do exactly what was asked for, and you're like, hey, team, you can't do it, but you understand why, so you can do something, and I go back to Steve and I say, hey, Steve, I know you wanted X, Y, and Z. And he knows that I knew, because we've done this already, right? And I say, but we can do this. He's going to be like, okay, and we're starting there. If I didn't do that, paraphrase, when I come back and say, we can do this, he's going to go, maybe you didn't understand me. And he's going to re-explain, and I've wasted time. So that's where setting clear expectations lie. Being clear that we're on the same page, so when I come back to advise you that we need to do something differently, I have credibility with the first sentence coming out of my mouth. The first step in using the notification of risk process to retrain executives not to go into fight or flight is doing all the other stuff that I talked about. Because just about everything that I've talked about today has a lot to do with you being credible. And credibility is really important in leading up, down, and across. Credibility with your team, credibility with your peers, credibility with the executives. So the idea is start developing credibility by employing some of these techniques. When your first impediment or obstacle or problem arises, what you're going to do is you're going to go get with the team and you're going to rule of tens, which means you're going to work the problem with the team until you have 10 possible solutions. 10 solutions. What's that called? Diligence. The first solution that they throw out is going to be the quickest way to get it off somebody's desk. Plus, the executive, if you go in and you're like, that sounds like a good idea, and I go to Steve and I say, here's a problem, here's my good idea to solve it. Steve's job is to make sure I did my diligence, so he's going to think of another possible solution. And he's going to say, did you consider this? What happens if I say no? What happened to my credibility? And I'm going back, right? I have to go back to the team. I'm starting over. Is that as efficiently and effectively as possible? Have I just left time and money on the table? Rule of tens. I'm going to come up with 10 possible solutions. Plus, the further you get from one, the harder you're going to have to work to come up with them. Do this exercise sometimes. The solutions on the other side of 5 are always better. It's true. And again, I could tell you a story about that, but I don't have time. So rule of 10, now you're going to go back to your desk and you're going to prepare a brief email, no more than 2 paragraphs. A brief description of the problem, a brief description of the solution, right? And you're going to send it. They won't get it. They won't get it. You're going to send it, and then you're going to go find them. Now I'm going to show up to your office and I'm going to execute the rest of this. Now you've got to script this. This goes back to Pavlov. You're reconditioning an already conditioned response. It requires you to be consistent. The formula is, I have everything under control. Say that. It's beautiful. I love hearing it. I have everything under control. Who didn't just love hearing me say that? I have everything under control. He just tried to Jedi mind trick me. Did you see him? I have everything under control. So you're going to say I have everything under control. The rest, though, briefly describe the risk, briefly describe the solution, stop talking. So here's the thing that I say every single time. I haven't done this in a while. But I'll say, hey, boss, do you have a second? I have everything under control. I just need to get you in the loop on a solution that we're working for a risk. I don't need anything from you. I got right to it. How far into fight or flight did they get? Did they start talking? Did they interrupt me? Or did I just LEAD somebody? Right? So they're laughing because they're like, that's a new one. Hey, boss, do you have a second? I don't need anything. I have everything under control. I just need to get you in the loop to a solution. I'm working to a risk. I don't need anything from you. Then I'm going to briefly describe the risk. I'm going to briefly describe the solution. I'm going to stop talking. They're going to think. And they're going to say, have you thought of this? Of course I did. I thought of 10 possible solutions with the subject matter experts. I'm going to say, yes, here's why what I just presented is a better solution. They're going to say, have you thought of this? They'll ask up to 3 questions. If I can answer all of them, 1 of 2 things will happen. They'll approve what I proposed, and I walk out of there with an enormous amount of what? Credibility. Or they'll tell me what to do. They'll say, I hear you. I need you to do this. In which case you'll use the 3 steps to credibility. And then you'll walk out of that office with what? An enormous amount of credibility. So, and then 3 or 4 days later, they'll find that email in their inbox. And by the way, you have previously told them that you're going to send that email anytime you identify a risk, and they're going to think it's a really good idea, even though we all know it's kind of a silly idea. What, 7% efficacy, leadership efficacy? That's really so you prepare yourself to lead. There's a huge difference in identifying 10 solutions and then figuring out how you're going to message the solution. So a week later, you're going to have another problem that you're going to have to bring to the executive, right? You'll go through the exact same exercise. You'll knock on the door. You'll say, hey, boss, do you have a second? They'll look up. You'll say, I have everything under control. As they're looking up, they don't remember your face. They don't remember your name. They see you, and here's what happens in their mind. This went pretty well last time. You go through the exact same exercise, stop talking. They ask you the questions. They approve or tell you what to do. You leave. By the 3rd time you do this, when you knock on the door and you say, hey, boss, and they look up, do you have a second? I have everything under control. They're like, that's that J guy. Yeah. 3rd time. 4th time, hey, boss, do you have a second? They know my name before they look up. By the 5th time, they're looking up, and this isn't even necessary anymore because they're looking up and sitting back in their chair. They're like, what do you got, man? Because here's what they know. I'm going to have everything under control. I'm going to provide a solution. They won't be able to ask me a diligence question that I won't be able to answer. I'm going to be brief. I'm going to be brilliant, and then I'm going to be gone. All right, so 4 credibility techniques. Be fearless, reverent, confident. Be cool, honey bunny. Don't communicate in mumbo jumbo. Communicate a can-do attitude. 7 leadership techniques. Start with why. Face-to-face leadership for 100% efficacy. Take responsibility for what's heard. Doing accountability, the 4 principles. Managing expectations in 3 steps. Providing updates. And eliminating fight or flight. And,